Billy Bob wasn't your typical spacefarer. He didn't wear a sleek uniform or command a battleship. No, sir, he was a space trucker, a hauler of cargo, a navigator of cosmic highways, and a man who could fix a hyperdrive with duct tape and sheer determination. Billy Bob, you idiot, what in the 7 moons of Titan were you thinking? That voice belonged to Jeb Ralston, owner of Ralston Freight Logistics, and the closest thing Billy Bob had to a boss. Now, Jeb, before you start hollerin'. Before I start hollerin'? Boy, do you know how much a crate of plutonium peanuts costs? You dumped half your load into space. Billy Bob leaned back in his chair, boots up on the dash. Now hold on, Jeb, you ever try eatin' a peanut while pirates are shootin' at ya? That's beside the point, Jeb bellowed. You better have something to show for this or I swear. As if on cue, Captain Yara popped onto the channel. Mr. Ralston, this is Captain Yara of the Starfire. Your driver here just saved my ship from a pirate attack. Jeb's tone changed immediately. Captain Yara, well, now, mighty fine to meet ya. Hope my employee was, professional. Professional might be a stretch, Yara said dryly, but effective? Absolutely. She held up a holocredit chit. I'd like to pay for his lost cargo, plus a little extra for his trouble. Billy Bob gave Jeb a smug look as the old man spluttered. Well, I suppose that changes things. Billy Bob, you, keep up the good work. Why here, the comm cut off before he could respond. Billy Bob chuckled. You got Jeb tongue-tied. That don't happen often. Yara smirked. Seems like you've got a habit of stumbling into trouble and coming out clean. Trouble just don't like letting me go, he said, pocketing the chit. So, Captain, where's your next stop? Vega 5, cargo delivery, but I could use an escort, seeing as pirates have taken a liking to me. Billy Bob scratched his chin. Vega 5 was a rough place, full of gamblers, crooks, and fast talkers, his kinda town. Well now, I reckon Big Betty and I could use a little side gig, he said. Yara smiled. Good, but let's get one thing straight, I'm paying you to watch my back, not cause more chaos. Billy Bob gave her a lopsided grin. Captain, what's space without a little fun? As the two ships set course for Vega 5, Billy Bob had a feeling this was just the beginning of one hell of a adventure. His ship, the Big Betty, was a rugged, rust-speckled freighter, held together by love, luck, and a few questionable engineering choices. It wasn't the fastest ship in the galaxy, but it got the job done. One fine day, while hauling a load of plutonium peanuts to a distant colony, Billy Bob received an urgent distress signal. He leaned back in his chair, scratching his scruffy chin. Ain't never a dull moment, he muttered, flipping on the comms. This is Captain Yara of the Starfire. We're under attack by pirate raiders. Anyone out there, please respond. Billy Bob sighed. Space pirates again? He should have known this was going to be one of those hauls. Hang tight, Missy, he said, punching in a new course. Billy Bob's on the way. With a shudder, Big Betty groaned into action. The engines coughed up a burst of blue fire, and within minutes, Billy Bob arrived at the scene. Sure enough, 3 pirate skiffs surrounded a sleek transport ship, blasting away at its shields. Billy Bob didn't have weapons, at least. Not officially, but what he did have was 200 tons of cargo and a willingness to make bad decisions. Gritting his teeth, he shoved the throttle forward. Y'all ever seen what happens when a space trucker gets mad? He said over the open channel. The pirates turned just in time to see Big Betty barreling toward them at full speed. Billy Bob slammed the cargo eject button, releasing crates of plutonium peanuts straight into their flight path. The high-density containers collided with the pirate ships, sending them spinning wildly. One skiff smashed into another, and the third panicked and zipped off into deep space. Hot damn, Billy Bob hooted, watching the pirates scatter. That's how you take out the trash. Captain Yara's ship stabilized, and her face appeared on his comm screen. She had dark eyes, a fierce expression, and a voice full of relief. That was insane, she said, but I'm grateful, you saved our hides. Billy Bob grinned. Just another day on the job, ma'am. As he turned Big Betty back toward his original course, he had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time he ran into trouble or adventure on the galactic highways. And that was just the way he liked it. Billy Bob had barely dusted off from his pirate-smashing heroics when his comm crackled to life again. This time, it wasn't a distress signal, it was his employer. Vega 5 loomed ahead, a neon-soaked smuggler's paradise spinning lazily in the dark. It was the kind of place where fortunes were made, lost, and stolen all in the same night. Durgan Tutos Malek cracked his knuckles again, a wicked grin stretching across his scarred face. Around them, casino patrons were already moving out of the way, some placing bets, others just eager to watch a good old-fashioned beatdown. Billy Bob sighed, taking a slow sip of his drink before setting it down. All right, Durgan, let's be civil about this. Wham! Durgan's massive fist shot forward. Billy Bob barely dodged, the punch smashing straight into the poker table and sending chips flying. All right, fine, hard way it is, Billy Bob yelped, diving backward just as Durgan swung again. Yara groaned, stepping away from the fight and grabbing a drink from the bar. He's on his own, she muttered, watching the brawl unfold. Durgan lunged forward, aiming to grab Billy Bob by the collar, but the space trucker was surprisingly quick on his feet. Years of dodging creditors, angry bartenders, and vengeful ex-girlfriends had given him a sixth sense for incoming punches. Billy Bob ducked, grabbed a half-empty bottle off the table, and smashed it over Durgan's thick skull. Durgan barely flinched. Billy Bob blinked. Well, that ain't good. Thwack! Durgan's massive hand finally caught him, hurling Billy Bob over the table and into a group of bewildered aliens playing a game of holochess. Billy Bob groaned, rolling onto his hands and knees. All right, you overgrown sack of bad decisions, now I'm mad. He grabbed a nearby hoverchair and hurled it straight at Durgan's face. The bounty hunter swatted it away like a fly. Billy Bob gulped. By now, the entire casino had turned into a chaotic mess. Some patrons had joined the fight, old rivalries flaring up, drinks flying, tables flipping. It was beautiful, in a destructive kind of way. Yara sighed. Well, guess I better do something. She casually reached for her sidearm, a sleek plasma pistol, and fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Zap! The entire bar went dead silent. Even Durgan stopped mid-punch, his fist inches from Billy Bob's already bruised face. Yara exhaled, blowing an imaginary puff of smoke from the barrel. All right, fun's over. Billy Bob, seeing an opportunity, grinned. Yeah, what she said. Durgan scowled, stepping back. This ain't over, trucker. Billy Bob dusted himself off. Oh, I'd be real disappointed if it was. But before things could escalate again, a voice crackled over the casino's intercom. Attention, unregistered vessel Big Betty, docked at Bay 94, is hereby seized under galactic law for unpaid docking fees. Billy Bob froze, his eyes went wide. Ah, hell. Yara sighed again. Let me guess, you forgot to pay your fees? Billy Bob held up a finger. Now, see, forgot is such a strong word. Durgan's grin returned. Looks like you got bigger problems than me, trucker. Billy Bob groaned. Ain't that always the case? Billy Bob adjusted his worn-out cap and leaned forward as Big Betty approached the landing docks. Ya know, Captain, this here planet's got a way of making honest folks do dishonest things. Yara smirked over the comms. Good thing neither of us are particularly honest. Then, Billy Bob laughed. Fair point. After touchdown, the two made their way into the main hub Neon Gulch, a sprawling mix of casinos, bars, and shady trade posts. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, engine grease, and desperation. Yara had a job to do, delivering her cargo to some corporate suits at Orion Freight, so Billy Bob decided to kill time the best way he knew how: gambling and bad decisions. He strolled into the Rusted Credit, a backwater casino where the dealers cheated, the drinks were watered down, and the house always won except when Billy Bob played. He took a seat at a quasar poker table and cracked his knuckles. All right, boys, let's see if I remember how to lose gracefully. An alien with 3 eyes and a nasty grin dealt the first hand. Billy Bob glanced at his cards. Terrible. He grinned anyway. Well, ain't that something? By his third round, he was winning big, a few hundred credits stacked in front of him, and the other players were getting real nervous. That's when the trouble started. A deep, gravelly voice growled behind him. You've got a lucky streak, trucker. Billy Bob sighed. He knew that voice. Durgan Tutos Malek, a bounty hunter with a face like a smashed moonrock and a temper to match. Billy Bob turned slowly. Well, if it ain't OL Tutos, ain't seen you since that time on Titan when you owe me. Billy Bob, Durgan interrupted, and I'm here to collect. Billy Bob scratched his chin. Now, I don't recall. 2 years ago, you borrowed my ship to escape a customs blockade. Billy Bob snapped his fingers. Ah, yeah, well, in my defense, I did return it. In pieces. Billy Bob chuckled nervously. Details, details. Billy Bob had exactly 3 minutes before the port authorities locked down Big Betty. All right, hold on to something, he hollered as he yanked the controls hard to the right. Big Betty tilted wildly, nearly scraping the side of a neon-lit skyscraper before shooting straight into the chaotic Vega 5 traffic lanes. Yara gritted her teeth. You're flying through the busiest part of the city. Billy Bob grinned. Yup. Durgan just laughed. This is gonna be fun. The chase through Neon Gulch. The pursuit ships opened fire, plasma blasts streaking past Big Betty as she weaved between speeding transports, gambling barges, and holographic billboards advertising Big Marty's discount laser cannons. Billy Bob dove straight through an underpass, barely squeezing Big Betty between two hovering cargo haulers. Whoa, betcha they weren't expecting that, he whooped. Yara, gripping the seat for dear life, muttered, because it was stupid. The security ships stayed hot on their tail, but Billy Bob had one last trick up his sleeve. The smuggler's jump. All right, we ain't gonna outrun him forever, Billy Bob admitted, flipping a few switches, but I know a shortcut. Durgan raised an eyebrow. To where? Billy Bob grinned and slammed the ship into a sharp vertical climb, shooting up into Vega 5's upper atmosphere. Yara checked the sensors. Billy Bob, there's nowhere to go, you're flying into a dead zone. Billy Bob cracked his knuckles. Nah, see, that's what they think. Just as the security ships thought they had him cornered, Billy Bob veered left, heading straight for a scrap field orbiting Vega 5, a graveyard of old freighters, abandoned satellites, and busted space junk. Yara's eyes widened. You're not serious. Billy Bob cackled. Oh, I'm serious. He dove straight into the debris field, twisting and weaving between massive chunks of floating wreckage. The security ships hesitated, one even clipped a derelict hull and spun out in a fiery explosion. Welp, that's one down, Billy Bob muttered. The remaining two pursuers stayed on him, dodging through the wreckage as Big Betty hurtled deeper into the junkyard. Billy Bob's fingers danced across the controls. All right, Betty, time to do what you do best, play dead. With the flick of a switch, Big Betty's engines powered down completely, the ship going dark as it drifted into the shadows of an old cargo freighter's massive hull. The security ships zoomed past, completely missing them. Yara exhaled sharply. I cannot believe that actually worked. Billy Bob grinned. Darlin', you gotta have a little faith in OL Billy Bob. Durgan chuckled. I'll admit, that was impressive. Stupid, but impressive. Billy Bob leaned back, hands behind his head. All right, now that we ain't gettin' shot at, how about we find ourselves a job? Yara raised an eyebrow. You just lost half your cargo, got a bounty hunter chasing you, and pissed off port security, and you want to take a job? Billy Bob grinned. Of course, what else would I do? Yara sighed. You are so gonna get us all killed. Billy Bob chuckled. Probably. As Big Betty drifted quietly in the scrap field, Billy Bob checked his comb. New message, urgent job, high pay, no questions asked. His grin widened. Well now, this just got interestin'. That was 2 minutes longer than he usually needed to get into trouble and 1 minute less than he needed to get out of it. All right, Yara, he said, dusting off his jacket. We gotta skedaddle before those repo boys slap a boot on my baby. Yara crossed her arms. Your ship is probably surrounded by armed officers. Billy Bob grinned. Probably. Durgan Two-Toes Malak, still rubbing his head from their fight, chuckled darkly. Oh, I gotta see how you pull this one off. Billy Bob clapped him on the back. Stick around, Two-Toes, and you just might get a free lesson in high-speed stupidity. The plan, or lack thereof. Yara sighed. All right, tell me you have an actual plan. Billy Bob gave her a look. Of course I do. Yara squinted. It's run for it and hope for the best, isn't it? Billy Bob grinned. See, now you're thinking like a trucker. She groaned. You are so going to get me arrested. The chase begins. Billy Bob took off like a bat out of hell, sprinting through the neon-lit streets of Vega 5's spaceport district. Yara followed, her hand hovering over her blaster. Durgan, for some reason, decided to tag along, maybe just to see how bad this could get. Ahead, the port gates leading to Big Betty were swarming with security droids and a few very grumpy-looking officers. Billy Bob skidded to a stop and muttered, "All right, might be more guards than I thought." Yara threw her hands up, "No kidding." Billy Bob thought fast, "We needed distraction." Durgan smirked, "I got one." Before anyone could ask what he meant, Durgan pulled a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, and chucked it into a fuel depot across the street. Billy Bob's eyes widened. "Oh, now that's a distraction." Boom! The entire street shook as a fireball erupted, sending people running and alarms blaring. The security officers panicked, turning away from the docking bays to deal with the explosion. Billy Bob slapped Durgan on the back. "See, this is why I like ya, buddy." Durgan grinned. "Move your ass, trucker." They bolted for Bay 94. Weaving through the chaos, security droids spotted them at the last second and opened fire, red plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. Billy Bob did a combat roll he absolutely did not need to do, slid up to Big Betty's ramp, and smacked the emergency override panel. The ship's door hissed open. "Get in, get in, get in." Yara and Durgan leapt inside just as Billy Bob slammed the door shut. "All right, Betty, time to move, sweetheart." He punched the ignition, and Big Betty roared to life, thrusters spooling up as warning lights flashed across the dashboard. Outside, the security forces had finally caught on. "Attention, unauthorized vessel, stand down or be fired upon." Billy Bob grinned. "Oh, boys, you don't know who you're messin' with. 2 thrusters at max burn, and one really bad idea."